All right, we are live. We are live. For those of you who might not know, my name is Jasmyne Ambrosia. I'm a content creator here on YouTube. This is my channel. We talk about witchcraft, folklore. We just hang out sometimes. That's kind of like what we're doing tonight. I have a guest on my channel with me tonight. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for those who might not know you?
Hey, yeah, my name is Chris. I'm on the Blood, Sweat, and Steel YouTube channel. And I'm a witch, polytheist, occultist, blacksmith, and general just pagan.
Right on. Right on. Hello, everyone who's popping into the chat. Opaque Witch, Ivy's Grove, Xander, Seti, Animus, Christine. Good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. So how long have you been on YouTube as a creator?
I had about maybe a year or two. I don't have an exact number, but it hasn't been for very long. And just kind of doing something that I love and sharing bits and pieces that I figure out along the way.
Yeah. What made you decide that you wanted to be a creator?
I don't know. Honestly, I wanted to get in touch with the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to interact with the rest of the community. Yeah, like I didn't know anybody else who was pagan. I didn't know anybody else who did what I do. And since I'm glad I did it, because since then I've met a lot of friends, not in person, but met a lot of people in the community and got to know them. And I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's been excellent.
Christine's asking, how often do you post content?
Not often enough. For the first couple of years, I was an over-the-road truck driver, and I'd be out on the road for 4 weeks at a time and come home for 4 days. So that didn't leave me a whole lot of time to post any content in the shop, because I was almost never in the shop.
Right.
And then more recently, I changed jobs, and now I can, and I'm really bad at being consistent. On YouTube anyway. So, and sometimes I'm just burnt out after work. So I only post, maybe every 2 or 3 months. That needs to increase. That needs to improve, because I want to do it more. I have plans for different videos and doing different things with glamour magic and steel. And there's things that I want to share that I just don't have the energy to at during the week.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. Like it can be difficult to find a schedule that works for you and stick with it. And like
Mm-hmm.
I also initially got into making content just because like I wanted to get more involved with the community and it felt like a good way to get to know other
Yeah,
practitioners. So I definitely relate to that and I relate to struggling with a content schedule too.
yeah,
I lately just got over like a nasty bit of having pneumonia and
yeah.
that threw me out of my regular routine. And I'm really good at routines when I'm in them. But then if I get thrown out of my regular routine, it takes me a while to like get
Yeah,
back into it.
yeah. Getting back into the swing of things can be a bit of a pain in the butt. And like once I get going, I'm moving.
Yeah. It's
But when
that
I
like
stop,
inertia. Yeah.
yeah, like when yeah, exactly. An object in motion stays in motion. That whole
Well,
thing.
I think we really need to talk about the forge. Like, I think that
Okay.
that's like something
All right.
I'm personally very interested in. It's something that I don't see a lot of people really talking about
Yeah.
online so much. I mean, I've kind of been introduced to like the anvil or the oath stone through like American traditional witchcraft, and like that's kind of become more in my sphere. Um,
Mm.
but I would love to know more about it.
Okay. It actually so you take a cauldron and just replace it with an anvil. Almost. Um, you have the four elements there: earth, the heavy metal anvil; air, which is the bellows, or in my case, it's a gas forge. You have propane bottles. And it's a gas that's close enough to air. Water is the quenching bucket, and then fire is pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So, but and then let's say you're going to do a basic money spell, right? You write your petition as you normally would, but instead of burning it in the cauldron, you place it under the foot of the anvil. And as you work, rather than dancing or doing ecstatic dancing to raise energy, you're using the process of forging steel to raise energy. And this is something I started doing because I don't feel energy. I don't smell it. I don't see it. I don't taste it. I don't hear it. I believe it's a thing, and it's a thing that people can use. I haven't developed the ability to perceive
Well,
it.
do you think you have aphantasia?
No, I actually have the opposite of that. I visualize extremely well.
Okay. Okay.
Right. I'm not talking about visualization. If I couldn't visualize anything, I wouldn't be able to make a knife. You have to be able to see
Right.
the knife in the blob of steel,
Right.
which looks nothing like a knife. The process of forging actually is excellent practice for that. Now, if you don't have a forge or a blacksmith, try sculpting out of clay. You have to see the thing that you want in that blob of clay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very similar concept. Um, but what I don't do is I don't perceive energy in the same way that I hear talked about. And I don't even know what people mean. Like the energy of this crystal or that crystal. I'm going, what the hell are you talking about? It's a pretty rock, but it's just a pretty rock. I don't feel any energy. I don't see it. And I believe that other people can. So the way my workaround is, okay, I need some kind of an energy that I can use that I can perceive. So
Mm-hmm.
building building energy through forging. Well, okay, what are you doing when you have a very large piece of cold metal and you put a very hot piece of metal on top of it? Well, heat's going to go to what's colder. The anvil acts like a massive heat sink and it absorbs heat while you're working. At the end of an 8 or 10 hour day, you could fry an egg on the surface of the anvil. Not that I'm going to because I don't want to ruin my anvil, but I use that to give me a gauge as to how much energy I'm raising magically because I can feel it physically in the anvil. And the petition being under it, it's sort of like putting your ingredients into the cauldron and then forging it. You're mixing those ingredients, that intention into the energy that I'm using the thermal energy of forging as a gauge for how much I'm putting in. So, thank you, Witch of Enchantment. Then, when you're done forging, what I do is I have two apps. One is just a straight up compass, and the other one is something called Star Tracker. And I will, hi Megan Black, how are you? And I will turn the anvil so that the point of the horn faces either the compass direction that corresponds with my intention or the astrological sign that corresponds with it.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And as the anvil cools down physically, that is my way of setting it up so that the energy releases and goes off to do its thing.
And what kind of stuff are you making at the anvil? Like I think I've seen you make like a blade.
Oh yeah.
And I think I've seen you make some sort of knot thing.
Depending on what you're talking about, that's either a troll's cross or that was
the troll's cross, maybe.
Yeah, that's the troll's cross is one of my favorite sigils to forge.
Tell us about that.
Bringing a lot of different aspects into your work, very cool. The troll's cross?
Yeah, the troll's cross.
Okay, so
I just like the way that sounds.
Okay, well, it's a knot. It looks like a loop. The ends of that loop, it looks sort of like a ribbon, and then the ends of the ribbon curl in, and it sort of looks like a pretzel. It's made out of steel. Traditionally it's made out of wrought iron. Wrought iron's hard to come by nowadays. Mild steel is the most common.
Why is it hard to come by?
Because it's no longer mass produced.
Okay.
Because mild steel is technically a better material. It's more resilient and it has more tensile strength, because wrought iron is a whole bunch of little drips of iron that have been forge welded together into a solid bar. That's where the term wrought iron comes from. Wrought is to shape by forging. Wrought iron is iron that's been shaped by forging. It is not homogeneous. It's actually got no carbon in it, which means it's not steel. When you add carbon, you no longer have iron, you have steel. But wrought iron, I have hypotheses about that too. Wrought iron makes excellent protective amulets and talismans because it is many, many, many pieces of iron forge welded together. So when you put one protective spell into it, you're actually dispelling all of those pieces of metal. It creates protection through redundancy.
Okay.
So you're casting one spell, but you're getting several hundred of the same protective spell, in my opinion, because you're casting into one piece, but that one piece is made up of quite a lot. It's to deter malevolent trolls or yes, that is correct. It's a ward, effectively.
So would you put this in front of like doorways or like outside of your home, or like just
typically you'd wear it on your person?
Oh, like a piece of jewelry, like an amulet?
Or a belt loop.
Okay.
Or a belt decoration, or as a you could wear it as, like, back in the day they had cloaks. You could use
I think we need to bring those back for casual wear.
So do I. I think we need to bring cloaks and robes back. I mean,
yeah. I just recently got like a real big red cloak, and I'm trying to wear it like every opportunity I get, just for like the theatrics of it all.
Yeah, like cloaks, robes, hoods, absolutely.
Seti wants to know about like your practices, which gods or entities or cultures are like part of your practice.
So I'm a hard Celtic polytheist, and I work with the Celtic pantheon, but specifically Bridget and the Morrigan. And recently, two other deities have been becoming much more interesting. I've been feeling pulled towards much more lately are Hephaestus and Hel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you're just recently feeling pulled towards Hephaestus. I would think
You're not,
all the work that you
yeah.
would do, but I
So,
see Bridget in that too, though. I
oh
see
yeah,
Bridget with the forge for sure.
oh yeah. Well, Bridget, yeah, she's the goddess of fire and smithcraft back to
Hmm.
the
She's
ancient Celts.
badass.
Oh yeah. Well, she wears a lot of hats too, and Bridget. So yeah, for me, it's to answer the question is Bridget the Morrigan, Hephaestus, and Hell. But Hephaestus and Hell are much more recently. Bridget kind of wouldn't take no for an answer. Um, Bridget actually, that's how I became pagan. Was through her. I didn't know what was happening. I just figured it was a weird dream, and I ignored it. And it kept on coming. It was a recur. It ended up being a recurring dream where I would hear the sound of an anvil and get woken up by it, and then hear a metallic voice saying, iron is life, iron is your power," and it kept recurring and recurring. And then I dropped the remote for the Xbox while I was watching gaming YouTube videos, and that's all I ever watched. I never searched anything spiritual or religious in any way. When I
Okay.
dropped the remote of the Xbox, Laura Galligan's video for Bridget came up, and that kind of tripped my curiosity, and I started looking into it, and I was like, oh, you're a blacksmith. This explains a lot. And things just kind of, I just kind of got steamrolled from there. So, and because I'd already made the decision to start forging, but I didn't know it would be a pagan thing.
This is Sid, who's also crafting. This is also who I had on the channel last night when we were talking about Eileen Warnos. But they were wanting to know, interesting that you work with Hel, but more Celtic deities. Do you care to share the Celtic influence instead of Norse? Is that just something that you just feel called to? Is that
So I haven't started working with Hel. I've been feeling more pulled towards her and more inclined to pay attention to her lately because I actually, well, I know why, but I don't know why. Hel and Hephaestus are the same reason. So one of the shadows I've always struggled with is the shadow of feeling ugly or unattractive or unwanted or rejected, which I know is a very psychological thing, and I can cope with it, I can deal with it, but it's like it's always there. Your shadows are always there. Well, who better to help you deal with that than Hephaestus and Hel? Like really, it actually makes a lot of sense in that way, and it's Hephaestus actually is the only god in Mount Olympus who's believed to be ugly, and he's a blacksmith. So that one makes a lot of sense. Hel surprised me.
mm-hmm.
Made any oaths. I haven't really done any offerings. I've just been paying more attention to her myth and looking into it more. So I don't work with Hel. It's just I acknowledge that she's a force in my life right now, and I don't know why.
Well, maybe I definitely think that the gods call to who they call to when they call to,
Mm-hmm.
for what they call to. And
Yeah.
like for myself growing up, I was like the Egyptian pantheon was for sure just
Oh
even
yeah.
like aesthetically all around growing up and like my family's decorum. Like my grandmother still has like replica canopic jars like over her mantle and everything. So like I feel like some of those deities were the first ones that I kind of realized that like there were other gods, but I wouldn't say that those were the gods that I first started working with.
Mm.
For me, it was definitely Bridget, which we don't necessarily have the same relationship that we did then. I remember like my very first dedication ever back when I was like really identified, predominantly with like neo-paganism and Wicca.
Right.
Not that
Okay.
I not that I wouldn't necessarily use the label as pagan. I just prefer just witch now. Like that's what works for
Right.
me. That's what's best for me. I feel like in some ways I fall further and further from the pagan community by the day. Um,
I I get that. I mean, You you don't pull your punches, and you're not afraid of some of the more controversial topics, which can scare a lot of people off. Which I
Well, and
don't agree with.
I have nothing against pagans or anything like that. I think I
Right.
would still fall underneath that umbrella to a degree. But yeah, it was Bridget for me. And I remember doing my first dedication. This would have been like circa 2014, where I like formally dedicated myself to the goddess in the face of Bridget during Imbolc. And like that was
Okay.
the whole tea. It's like I have a whole thing in my BOS about it. I look back now and I'm like, I was so cute. Like I was so cute at the time. I was talking with the nerdy warlock recently. Um
Okay.
and they were like, "Oh my gosh, girl, like I went back and watched some of your videos because I've been on YouTube for like 10 years or so. So I have videos that are just so cringe. But Bridget basically brought me to the Morrigan. And then like I had
Yeah.
worked with Bridget, and then that kind of took me, I feel like she almost like shepherded me into it in a way.
Right.
And then I kind of was with the Morrigan for several years before that kind of just grew into just kind of walking with this dark mother archetype
Yeah.
as a collective. Which now I feel much more cosmic and less like earth based about
Yeah.
it. And we were talking about some of that the other day when we were talking about the stream and how, I work with metals more in the sense of like planetary magic and
Yeah.
alchemy. But I think that like this hands-on metal work that you do is so cool. And I was also talking with another friend right before this stream. We were talking about nerdy stuff and like gaming and the
Oh
stuff
yeah.
going on with World of Warcraft right now, but she was saying how a blacksmith would be such like an underrated, very needed thing in a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And like no one thinks about that.
People don't think about it, but yes, it would. Um,
So Little Red wants to know, have you ever worked with Vulcan? He's like the Roman version of
like,
Hephaestus. Just curious. I find Vulcan comes to me easier than Hephaestus.
I respect Vulcan as an excellent craftsman and smith, but I don't work with him, and I'm not familiar with his myths nearly as well as I am, say, Hephaestus or Bridget. And actually, I'm not as familiar with Hephaestus's myth as I am with Bridget, but Bridget's been with me from the very beginning, back in 16. So, no, not that long. No. 20, yeah, 2016. Shit. Damn, that's been a while.
Sid says that I think she's talking about hell here, but tends to pull people into her underworld to unveil new ways of understanding death and death in relationships, shifts or transitions in your life, and how to work through the storms of life from their experience.
Yeah, like I mean, if she's talking about hell, yes, I agree. I'm not as familiar with her as I would like to be, and I don't really feel qualified to talk about her, even though she's definitely in my life. Like
Right.
I haven't met her yet, right? Like I know she's there, and I know she's a thing, and I know that like at some point she might decide that okay, now it's time. But I also don't. I don't get to make that decision. She does. So
Okay, so trolls crosses,
yes.
Athames.
Athames, yeah, in that knives, yes. And Athames in particular are interesting because they're much more difficult than, say, a standard work knife. So I'm still trying to perfect that now because they're double edged, which means you have to get the symmetry right. Otherwise, it's like you might not know exactly what's wrong, but if you look at it and it's ever so slightly asymmetrical, you know something's off. So that's something that I'm still trying to perfect. So I'm making single edged, like the CX is a single edged alternative to the Athame. So that's what I'm working on now. And um, Trolls Crosses, yes. Um, that's just that symbol in itself is believed to just be able to ward off negative spirits and trolls and people that are just bothering you by itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like if you hit someone hard enough with it, it would probably keep them away from you too.
I imagine so. Yeah, I
Right?
mean it is made of metal, so. But yeah, putting it over your door or wearing one on your person is, believed to be a ward, and you can infuse intention into any talisman. Iron is
Mhm.
particularly receptive to protective energies, so, as well as aggressive ones. Iron is used to make both armor and arms, so it has both functionalities.
Yeah, and even just like folklorically, that metal, isn't it also supposed to kind of repel just against like kind of elementals or nature spirits in general?
Yeah, it is said that like, well, from what I've read, there are certain fae that are repelled by it. And I've read because it's just they're allergic to it. I've also read they find it distasteful because it was used to forge axes which felled trees.
Okay.
So it either magically pushes them away or they really don't like it because of that history. I'm not certain which one is true. Maybe they're both true. I don't know. But yes, it can ward off like malicious fae. I've also heard that iron can ward off malicious spirits like ghosts. I don't know how much truth there is to that. Um, Iron horseshoes are supposed to ward off like the devil or bring good luck or both.
Hmm.
There's a
And they're
whole
supposed to be right side up, is what I've heard. Like,
nobody knows. Nobody
right?
knows.
I
There is a
heard
big
I I
argument.
heard that you're supposed to have them right side up because
So
then
that
your luck
holds the
never
luck.
runs out,
Right, so
right?
it holds all the luck in it. I also heard that you're supposed to turn them upside down so that it acts like an umbrella and keeps the bad stuff off of you.
Well, maybe it's kind of used how like hamsas a lot of times are used, where like if the hamsa hand is, up, which hamsa is just five in Arabic. If the hand is up like this, it's like stop or like blocking or pushing away the evil eye. Maybe
Okay,
like an upside down horseshoe would prevent the evil from getting in.
right.
And then if the hand is like the other way, so if it's not this way, but it's like this, it's more like give me the money hand. It's like receiving blessings. So like you'll
Or
see
good luck.
that painted on
Yeah,
businesses and stuff.
actually makes a lot of sense. Like
So maybe it can be both.
I think it could be used both ways.
I would say that if it's upright, I would consider that more like talismanic in the sense that like it's attracting. And then if it's like upside down, if the horseshoe's like this, you know what
Right.
I mean? Then I would see that more as like an amulet, like
This makes
amulet
me
as like it's more of a ward.
that makes me wonder if you could use a troll's cross in the same manner.
What would you
I
use it
don't
for?
know.
To attract good spirits?
To attract good spirits or good luck or good
What
energy.
spirits would be attracted to iron?
Gnomes.
Gnomes?
No, I mean any earth spirit, right? But well, there's an argument that you could make for air because iron fell as meteorites through the sky. So where do you put iron? Is it earth? Is it air? Is it fire? The only one that I can't see is water, unless you consider the fact that they now build battleships out of metal.
Right.
So you could make an argument for all four elements, which is why I consider in my practice iron metal to be its own element. Metal and
Yeah.
wood are their own elements in my own personal way of doing things. So I actually books.
Yeah, that's a very Eastern kind of
It
approach
actually is.
too.
Yeah, it actually is. It's actually inspired by uh, Chinese system of elements, but they use five. I'm using six. It's similar. It's inspired by, but yeah, give credit where credit is due. But I'm not using it the same way.
I've really never worked with metal thus far as an element in of itself. And I've also not really worked with wood. Like I've always just been very earth, air, fire, water,
Right. Well,
spirit,
that's the standard.
you know?
That's a very Celtic or kind of a standardized occultism
Yeah.
way of doing it, and it's not wrong. It's not my way isn't correct. My way isn't incorrect. It's just a different way of doing it.
No, but I think it'd be fun to try to work with like wood or metal.
Yeah, or what else could be its own element, right? Like you could just that could be an exercise in kind of changing things up in your craft. Is
Yeah.
what else could be an element? Maybe magnetism could be its own element. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you can make an argument for all sorts of different things being an element.
Yeah.
And you can also make an argument for, oh no, that should fall in this category because this already exists. Why are we making it more complicated? Well, you're kind of missing the point of the whole exercise if you want to argue. What brought this about was the whole, we're supposed to have an athame and a wand, and the athame is air, which makes no sense on the surface. It's made from metal, which is either earth or, because it has to be forged, fire. And it's like, well, actually, when you look into metallurgical history, iron, the first iron that was ever used for smithing was meteoric iron because bronze tools weren't strong enough to mine iron out of the ground. So you can make the argument for air. And if you're relating it to ancient practices, I can't see it for water. But somebody else might make a connection that I wouldn't.
Yeah. When I associate like the athames or like the swords, like with more of a Rider-Waite-Smith tarot background, because in the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, a lot of people who come to this divination system like are sometimes kind of put off by like the wands actually being fire and like the swords actually being air.
Right.
And I think how I connect with it is through that Rider-Waite-Smith way, in the sense that I think like the swords represents the mind and like the intellect and like the logic and like intuition and like thought and speech. And our tongues are kind of like swords. Like they can be sharp.
Oh yeah.
So I think of it that way. And then wands with fire, I think of like passion, life force, gusto, and like a thelema sense, like our will being personified through the tool.
And I can see that connection too, but I'm much more literal. I see fire makes sense to me for the wand because wood is combustible.
Yeah.
So like it's a more literal connection, but also, yeah, I see your way too. Like, yeah, fire is passion, fire is creativity.
Yeah. And I think it's our will. Like, I think it's quite literally our will. And we're using the wand as a conduit of our will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that in like ATW, there's really 3 different ceremonial blades or like athames. There's like your red one, your white one, your black one. There's the one for sacrifice, and then there's the one for physical craft.
Right.
And then there's the one for like in the more astral craft.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Do you think like, I mean, would they all, like if you were to forge ritual blades that fall into these categories of like, okay, this red blade is going to be used for sacrifices and for blood workings. And like this black blade is going to be used for like carving candles or slicing, pulling, pruning herbs, or, doing physical craft labor with the black handled knife, or like the white knife and that being used for more ceremonial magic and like cutting into the astral. Like, how would you represent those?
If I were to reinvent that whole system of magic, I would not focus so much on the color of the handle as I would the material that the blade is made out of.
That's what I mean. What material would you use?
Well, a knife meant for bloodletting, right? Like for blood magic. I'd use bronze because bronze was the first metal to be used as a weapon.
Okay.
And it was also the first metal to be used as a tool. It's the first metal that ever cut flesh. Well, actually, copper is, but bronze is a alloy of copper. And bronze is stronger, it's more resilient.
I was going to say, wouldn't copper, isn't that kind of like a weaker metal?
Copper is. It's a much softer metal. But when you add tin to copper, you get bronze. And that's a much, much stronger metal. Actually, it is so strong that it is on par with wrought iron. The reason wrought iron is better is because it only requires a single mined resource, as opposed to bronze, which requires both copper and tin. But in terms of hardness and tensile strength, they're on par with each other. Wrought iron is marginally stronger, but not by a noticeable amount. Now, steel, yeah, steel's a hell of a lot stronger. But that took a long while, which is why for cutting, like for working with like astral work, I would use steel because steel took many, many, many iterations of learning metallurgical, the science of metallurgy. We had to use our mind to get steel. We had to earn it through experimentation, trial and error, and sometimes accidents. Will of fire swords, my kind of conversation. Yep. Bronze is actually very strong, Rebecca. I'm comparing, we're talking relative strength. But yeah, bronze also doesn't rust. It bronze weapons survive thousands upon thousands of years being buried in the mud, whereas a steel or iron weapon would have rusted and corroded away. That's a different kind of strength.
Yeah, that sounds like a good benefit for sacrificial blood workings.
Yeah. So, but for working with the mind, I would use steel. For physical cutting and doing work, well, iron is kind of the middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of off the cuff. Like, I wasn't
Right.
ready for that question.
Oh no, I mean there's not,
It's
I
a
don't
good
know if there's
question.
really like a right or wrong to it, you know?
Right.
And guys, this live, we have not talked about what we were going to talk about at all. Like we're just hanging out here. So if you guys
Yeah.
have questions about metal and magic, feel free because this is really
Yeah.
just like a casual hangout. So,
Yeah.
and Chris, there's not, it's not like there's a right or wrong, you know?
Oh, yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah. But it's an interesting topic, and it's an interesting exercise
Yeah.
in building your own personal correspondences, having these conversations with people, and like, okay, well, if you were going to redo that, what would you see? Yeah, I
Well, and
absolutely agree.
my very first Athame, I still have it. I still use it. Never once have I actually considered what it's actually made out of. Like, not even once had I considered that. Like, I had initially gotten it at a pagan pride, and there was a like Italian folk magic booth.
Okay.
And at the time, I had recently just kind of discovered Aradia and like those mysteries and the Gospel of Aradia. And they had some daggers, some athames, and one of them had like a silver stag. And so I just got that one.
Right.
It's very, I've seen like it all over the internet since. So I don't think it's like a super special, you know, I think it's just like a wholesaled, like
No, but
goddess silver stag, but I've gotten a lot of use out of that. And then I have another one that I use as an athame, but it's actually a letter opener.
so that's what my anthem is. It's a
Yeah,
letter
it's a,
opener. It's just
yeah.
it was my first anthem was a letter opener that was designed to look like a Scottish claymore. So
Jordan, first of all, it's great to see you here, Jordan. Much love to you. Hope that you're doing well. An athame is basically just like a ritual blade or a dagger.
yeah,
Like it's just kind of like a fancy word used to kind of describe it being used in magic, as opposed to just like a knife.
I'm going to try and switch over to comments here from private chat because I can't currently see comments. Maybe I can. If there we go. That I was wondering why I couldn't see the comments because I was on the wrong tab. Okay, so
Seti says, like, what message or lessons do you feel Bridget and the Morrigan have for mankind based on your experience, and how have they changed you? That's a loaded question.
that. There's a lot to unpack there. Lessons for mankind. I don't know if I can really answer that question because I'm not a conduit for either or any deity. Um,
I don't feel that the Morgan has a message for mankind. Like I think that the
no,
Morgan kind of like she's doing her thing with prophecy, with fate, with the war, you know? Like
yeah,
she's over that. She's doing her thing, her transformation, and like she is sought after and petitioned to and, you know, attempts to earn her favor in these wars, be them
right,
literal or metaphorical, but I don't know if she really has a will of her own specifically for mankind. I could see
right.
Bridget, you know, having more of like that shepherding, protector of women, children,
Bridget,
inspirational muse, like wanting to
yeah,
maybe inspire and protect humanity.
yeah, Bridget. Yes, I would agree. I think Bridget, if hmm, Bridget feels more like a primordial force to me than well anything, but that's probably because of how I work with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the Morrigan is another. Yeah, the Morrigan is death itself. She's neither good nor evil. She just is, and she's the inevitable fate that everybody has to deal with.
Yeah.
So I don't think she's not bad. She's not good. She is necessary. And
Going back into metals, um, like working with amulets, talismans, jewelry, glamour magic, um, all of that, like even from like a Venusian sort of lens of like beauty and sex and
right,
power. Um, I really wish we had more gold and brass in esoteric and occult jewelry. Like it always kind of
yeah,
like disappoints me when I'm shopping for like um a new, you know, piece to enchant because most of my jewelry, even jewelry that might just look like very mundane, like a pair of like basic gold hoop earrings that like, you know, like these have like pentagrams and like
right,
satanic crosses on them. So this looks inherently kind of more something than like maybe a plain gold hoop. But those plain gold hoops might actually have an enchantment on them, whereas these might just like look fun and pretty. You know what I mean?
right.
Um, and it's always kind of disappointing when I'm looking at jewelry and like everything is in silver or sterling silver or
Yeah,
coated
and
in silver.
I mean, and sterling silver. Okay, that's legit, right? That's. I think there's a much heavier emphasis on the moon than there is on the sun
Hmm.
in occult spaces for one weird reason or another. Like I don't. I think a lot of that might be because a lot of people equate the sun with masculine energy, and they're just kind of sick of the masculine patriarchal bullshit from Christianity. So they
And
don't
it's
really.
cheap.
What's
It's
that?
cheaper.
Silver is yes.
Because
That
I was gonna say, like, you know, I also do work at a metaphysical store, and I know that, like, you know, when we're getting orders in, I'm not the one placing orders or anything like that.
right.
You know, I'm a teacher there, I'm a reader there, I'm not the one handling inventory. But I know that we have gotten better since I've kind of been like, can we get some brass or copper or something else in? We've started getting some more. But for the most part, a lot of the silver jewelry is so much more because it's so much cheaper to wholesale.
Yeah, and sterling silver as well, because even more so. Yeah, gold. That's I kind of glazed over that reason. Yeah, gold's gonna cost you more.
I love gold. I'm definitely more of a gold over silver, I would say.
See, see, I like bronze, the look of bronze more than I like the look of gold or silver.
I like
But
bronze. I like copper. I would love to have more copper ritual wear because like it's so conductive, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's yeah, it definitely copper is the second most conductive metal, silver being the most, but silver is more expensive than copper. So and it's marginally more conductive than copper.
And silver is stronger than copper too, right?
No,
No?
copper's harder, but not by
Okay.
much. Silver, you can dent it with your thumbnail.
Okay.
Pure silver, you can dent with your thumbnail. Same with gold. Gold, you can almost cut with your thumbnail, except I wouldn't try it because you're probably going to hurt your break a nail. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah, you might, um, but yeah, you can almost you can dent or mark silver and gold if they're pure with like your thumbnail or a butter knife. They're not hard metals. Where copper, you can't really do that without some kind of tool.
Yeah, the only copper piece I have is like a copper armband.
Yeah, those are good though. Those,
Yeah, I would
I
like
mean,
more.
yeah. Copper isn't often used in jewelry because I think it has a more industrial application than it does for personal jewelry for some reason. Well, because it's very good at what it does. Energetically, I see copper as a workhorse. It's if you want to have a metal to work with, if you feel energy or if you feel like if you're able to perceive the spirit of something, it's pretty likely that you're going to connect with copper as kind of a try hard worker.
I like copper a lot too because per planetary magic, per more like Sahir sorcery, if you will, like you have your ruling planet, you have your secondary planet, like your primary and your secondary. So for me as a Libra, copper is my ruling metal because copper is associated with the planet Venus, and Venus is my ruling
Yeah.
planet. And I actually have a list here. So in like old school Babylonian astrology, we didn't really have Neptune, Uranus, Pluto. Like those are relatively newer additions.
Well,
So
yeah.
in this planetary metal list, it's not including those, but there are lists now because in like modern Western astrology, we include Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so there are lists that have associations for those planets. But like, okay, so the sun being associated with gold and like the moon with
Yeah.
silver. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Quicksilver for Mercury or Mercury for Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury.
Copper for Venus.
Yep.
Iron is with Mars.
Mars. And actually, my ruling metal, because that's ruling Scorpio. I think, wait, am I wrong? Mars is the ruling planet for Scorpio, or am I wrong?
In some charts, you'll find Mars with Scorpio. Oftentimes, Aries goes with Mars. Sometimes you'll also find Pluto with Scorpio. So it would really depend. I think if we were looking at like an older chart like this one that doesn't include the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, then it would have to be Mars. Scorpio would have to be Mars. It wouldn't be with any other planet. But if we're looking at a more modern chart, Pluto is the ruling planet for Scorpio. But Pluto doesn't really have like a set in stone metal because it's like an outer planet. So it's like a newer addition to Western astrology.
Now I can think of one, but stainless steel.
We have tin for Jupiter and then lead for Saturn.
Yes.
What do you think about that list?
I think that's you're talking about the planetary metals of antiquity. That is like that's metallurgy. That's alchemy 101.
Mm-hmm.
That is right. That's you kind of have to run into that if you're going to deal with metal magic at all.
So this is kind of what I was saying, like what Nightlight is saying. In traditional astrology, Scorpio being Mars. Modern astrology, Scorpio ruled by Pluto.
Okay.
Yeah. But as far as like a metal goes, like it would either have to be iron if we're looking at it in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be interesting to think about metals associated with some of the outer planets because like Uranus rules like change. Like what metal is associated with like huge, big, drastic changes? Or like Neptune is like dreams. And it's very aquatic, like
very aluminum.
Aluminum.
Because aluminum doesn't corrode and it has massive applications in massive marine applications so I think it's Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would associate aluminum with Neptune, and then for Pluto,
Death.
Death, yeah. Well,
transformation.
Transformation. Again, something with a very low melting point then. Which would be, pewter's an alloy, not a metal. Gallium melts at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's non-toxic.
Do you ever put like oils or like
Yes, so I will, in the same way that like a lot of people make spell oils or ritual oils, I'll make quenching oils. A lot of the times there's different types and grades of steel that you don't want to quench in water because it'll crack or shatter. So you quench it in oil because it cools it down more evenly. So you would make a quenching oil in the same way that you would a spell oil.
Okay.
So yeah, I work with oils a lot. Well, not a lot. I'll make a batch of it, and that'll last me for a while. So, and that's mostly you can get industrial grade quenching oils. Those are petroleum based. I don't like them. I usually use peanut oil, and then when I'll make the quenching oil, I'll use olive oil and mix the different ingredients, usually lavender or mugwort or something, into it, and then I'll brew it like you would a potion, and then potion or an oil, and then I'll add as much as I think I need to the quenching oil based on what I'm doing.
Okay.
Does that answer the question, or are you going somewhere else with it?
No, I think that answered the question. I was just thinking, like, per magical consecration of tools, like aside from just energy,
Oh,
like I'm sure you could weave like the quenching oils, or
yeah.
other things into even just like with like the metal associations, like like, okay, like I'm going to wear this particular ring because it's made out of this particular metal with this particular stone because I want this particular effect. Like that's how I'm thinking of it in my mind. So I feel like if you were creating like a ritual dagger, like I would almost like deconstruct it backwards. Like I want this dagger to be used for this, so I'm going to make it out of this and I'm going to
Oh,
create
yeah.
it in this way.
Absolutely. And yeah, so anointing oils, yeah. So like you're talking about an anointing oil when the tool is done and you're putting your final stamp of approval on it for the use that you intend.
Or even like attaching charms to it.
Okay. Yeah. You yes, I could do that. I typically don't because most of my tools get used for a lot of different things. So I'll cleanse them and then I'll charge them and then do what I do.
Have you ever made armor? Is there an armor
No,
set laying around that you've made?
there is not. I don't have the
Yet.
tools, equipment. I don't have the tools, the equipment, or the experience necessary to make armor. I would love to make like an attempt at chainmail or an attempt at scale mail, but as a sample of it, um, I don't have the ability to, I don't have that kind of skill. I've been doing it for 5 years now. I I wish that I could tell you yes.
Well, a lot of blacksmiths, like, I mean, even what before, like, not that blacksmithing is not relevant now. Like, of course it's relevant now. But like when this was like a profession, like as common as like you would have the person, I'm thinking of like a Ren fair, right? Like the person baking bread and the butcher and the blacksmith and
Right.
whatever. Like, weren't most blacksmiths almost kind of like brought up in the profession, like their father or uncle
Oh
or like
yeah, their dad's
older
dad's dad.
mentor?
Yes. So we're talking about like we're talking about historically. Yeah, blacksmiths. That was a skill and trade that was passed down from father to son for generations upon
So I would say
generations.
if you don't have like a mentor per se, what you've been able to do in 5 years is pretty good.
Thank you. I don't have a mentor. Unless you count YouTube as a mentor, which you
It can be.
almost could. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you can learn a lot from YouTube. So like I can't make that claim that I don't have a mentor at all because anybody that wants a mentor has a mentor on YouTube to an extent.
Yeah.
Eventually, you got to pick up the hammer and hit something with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have any formal training. If that's a more accurate way of saying it. I have no formal training. And I just kind of been learning through watching YouTube and trial and error. and getting a feel for it. But I also have an extensive background in welding because that's what I did in the Coast Guard. I was what they call a damage controlman. That's a combination of many different things. One of which is shipboard, a ship fitter or a welder. It's what I did, and I've been welding since I was 14, my freshman year of high school. That's a long history with metal.
Did you start doing that vocationally?
I started doing that. My high school, when I started my freshman year, they didn't give you like a you picked your, what they call it, your vocational skill, that it was an electoral in your second year of high school. Your first year you had to go around and do a whole bunch of different stuff, and so that you can get a taste for everything and make a more informed decision about what you wanted to do. And I spent the first year, the last couple of months of my first year in metal shop, learning how to weld, and I took to it naturally, and I loved it. And then the next year, I immediately decided I wanted to be a marine biologist, so I took marine environmental occupations and didn't touch a welder again until I graduated and went into the Coast Guard and went, you know what? I remember really liking welding. I'm going to do that. So, because I wanted to be the marine biologist scientist, and that didn't work out. So, turns out biology is hard.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Corey says, hell yeah, fish are cool.
Hell yeah, they are. Hell yeah, they are. They're weird looking too, but I didn't learn nothing. My marine environmental occupations teacher, which is a mouthful, he was also a master falconer, and he brought his red-tailed hawk into class, and I got to go falconing with him. So that was awesome. And then some Karen complained about it, saying, "Oh, it's a dangerous animal." No, we are, but that's another story.
Right.
And then my year was the last year he was ever allowed to bring the hawk in. It was a hawk. He had, I think, a peregrine falcon and an owl. That was amazing. I loved that. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Uncle Badger says, I miss the metal classes I took in college.
Yeah, that I love metal class.
I liked this comment a lot by Nightlight. I've seen some people say that outer planets are like higher octaves of Mercury, Venus, and Mars. Mercury to Uranus, Venus to Neptune, Mars to Pluto. So you could apply their metals, I guess. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, actually, yeah. That would work, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay, so what metal would you associate with Chiron?
I don't know. Like, I associate Chiron with like the wounded healer and like inner traumas and skeletons in your closet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I know my metals.
It might not relate either.
Yeah.
That might be more of an alloy. So like the wounded healer, well, actually that's bronze. So in ancient Greece, that the warriors in ancient Greece, they had to sharpen their own weapons because everybody has to maintain your equipment. Well, the swords were made out of bronze. They would keep the filings, the bronze filings, because they discovered that those filings would actually keep your wounds clean, because copper and all its alloys are antimicrobial naturally. They didn't know that specifically, but they did know that a wound that had these metal filings in it didn't get infected as often. Now, that would not be comfortable, but if that's all you got, it would work. So I would associate bronze with Chiron, the wounded healer, because it has the ability to do both.
Rebecca says, what were the coins that were used to pay? What were the coins that used to be paid to him made of? Do you know?
Probably silver or gold.
I know that like I have worked with there's these coins that
Copper.
I think that these coins that I'm thinking of are made out of copper. Not the
Yeah.
same thing, but there's some like demonolatry coins that like you can just order online, and you can get the 72 keys on coins. So like working with Malphas or Barbatos or
Mm.
various demons, but like individually on coins. And there's different ways. I mean, the metal itself, I think, would be pretty conductive, but then also like I've used them in the sense of like, oh, what, familiar spirit should I petition for this? And like, stick my hand in the bag, draw a coin out, and be like,
Okay.
oh, okay,
A little bit
perfect.
of divination. Yeah. That's an interesting way to do divination. But so okay, so is astrology a big part of Sahir?
Like
Okay.
planetary magic and
Okay.
astrology pretty much are like the pillars of it. And then like
Okay.
Sahir just being, the Arabic word for magic that typically has like
Okay.
a baneful slant to it. Like
Okay.
it's considered like malefic, but a lot of the Sahir like that we have is either like Egyptian magic. So
Okay.
that's just like the magic of essentially like those Kemetic pagans, which I don't
Right.
think that they would really be viewing it as magic. It would be more just like what the
The
priesthood
way
was
of
doing.
life. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
how things are.
And then we have like pre-Islamic folkloric magic from, Mesopotamia,
Which
whether it be like working with elementals or jinn,
okay.
and petitioning those spirits, or even like post-Islamic Sahir, which is like kind of how there are some magical systems that involve like Christianity in the Bible and like that whole like religious system.
Okay.
And so there's the Islamic sort of Sahir too, where like you're saying duas or prayers or chants, working with jinn, working with demons, working with the planetary factors is really kind of like the main thing. It's much more like celestial high magic,
Okay.
like the Gael Al Hakim or the Picatrix, working within, certain planetary hours and times. So I mean, I've not really thought about this, but I guess there'd also be metal hours. If there's planetary metals and planets have, you
Hours.
know,
Whoa, you could really get into the weeds with it if you wanted to, couldn't you?
right,
Yeah.
because there's planetary days, planetary hours. So then you
Yeah.
would have hours and days with different metals
Well,
too.
yeah, because the alchemical symbols for every metal also is the exact same symbol for the corresponding planet.
Hmm.
Isn't it? So yeah, that's interesting. So this actually makes me um, very curious if the jinn are actually a part of that. There's an ancient, like there's a very old story. And I think I might have mentioned this to you, and I do a very bad job at retelling it on my channel. But it's the story of the blacksmith and the devil.
Why don't you tell us about it now? Why don't we talk about it now?
So the blacksmith and the devil is the oldest known story in folklore in that we can provably trace back to it's actually over 5,000 years old, and it comes from like obviously it comes from Europe, and I think it comes from like it iterations of the story are found in various locations around Europe, some of which are actually like in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and like up towards Damascus, India. So I think that and it's actually speculated by a couple of folklorists and historians that it was never always really the devil. In fact, that's a very recent Christianization of the story because Christianity is not that old. I think that this was like either the blacksmith. This started out originally as the blacksmith and insert scary spirit here. And the way the story goes makes me wonder if this might have been like, could that unknown entity have been a jinn? Because what the blacksmith does is he makes a bargain with the jinn to learn how to fuse different items, learning how to weld. Right, this is a myth about how blacksmiths learn how to forge weld, and sticking two pieces of metal together and binding them together permanently. Um, so much so that it's just as strong as a single piece of metal. And this sounds something like, okay, if you give me X, I'll teach you this. Now, according to the story, the blacksmith actually uses this power to fuse a part of the other entity's body part to his anvil and refuses to let him go until the blacksmith gets his price back and then gets to keep the ability to forge weld, which that's the part I kind of don't believe. This other entity got something out of the deal. But I think maybe that I'm not familiar with the Jinn, but does this sound like something that an Ifrit or some similar? Does this track folklorically with what you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folkloric stories about sihiras or magi basically pacting with spirits, and I think that that's just kind of a theme folklorically for witches in general.
Anyway, yeah.
And then with the Jinn, like there are different kinds. Like it would most certainly probably be more like the Afrit, which is more like the shadow people kind of Jinn, the mirror counterparts kind of to humanity, the closest at least, because like other types of Jinn, like the Marids, are like giant nature elementals of storms. I don't know if they would personally be interested in,
or would they even interact with humanity at
right.
all?
Right. And a lot of like the folklore, it's more like trying to ward away the Marids from like coming in and like wrecking the landscape and like kind of more controlling weather and storms and personifying that as Marids, like personifying those spirits as those entities. So I think it'd probably be more like that, or maybe the Shayateen Jinn, which that's more of like a political party of Jinn that like work with Iblis, Shaitan. So they could be different types of Jinn. Like they could be, you know, theoretically Marids could be Shayateen if they're in that alignment, or Afrit or Han or John or whatever. But I think that it could be. I think it could be any kind of.
Because the story, yeah. The only thing that makes me think that it might have originated as like maybe one of the Jinn, because his like the time period and geographical area that it comes from overlaps the geographical area where I think that I'm missing the word for it. Culture probably would have been.
Well, Uncle Badger says that there's a good amount of that also that are like Norse and Germanic as well.
Yes, there's a lot of them. I mean, these types of stories pop up all over the place. I mean, you were talking about
those stories of like our species, you know?
Yeah, that you talked recently on your channel about Jack the Lantern.
Mm-hmm.
How old is that story? Was it really the devil originally? I don't think it was. I think that was usurped. So, and also Willow the Wisp, who was also a blacksmith and kind of a dick. Like
I want to get more into some of this folklorically. Like as I've kind of gotten more into, I just like glitched over here. It was weird. But as I've gotten more into like American folkloric witchcraft, it's kind of like opened me up to thinking about working with these folkloric spirits, like actually working with Jack of the Lantern, which like I did do this past Hallows Eve. Yeah. And like, I know that he's Stingy Jack, but like I had a good experience with working with him.
Right.
Like we had a good thing going, Jack and I gave him what he asked for. He gave me what I asked of him. It was good.
Also, like history is written by the victor, right? How do we know that Jack was really that bad of a guy? Well, the people who kicked his ass tell us so. Okay, it depends on like who do you believe? I don't know.
I feel like Jack is supposed to kind of be this folkloric representation of narcissism and gluttony.
Yeah, that's possible, very possible, and it's a cautionary tale. But you had a good experience anyway.
Well, it's also kind of like, I mean, Jack fooled the devil at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, devil kind of got back at him.
Kind of, but how bad is wandering the earth for eternity, really? I mean,
You know,
as
I don't.
opposed to like the two other afterlife options that you get. I feel like he got to opt out of Christian cosmology, like entirely.
Yeah, he got to play his own ball game, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in a literal hell myself personally,
I don't
but
either. I don't
yeah,
either.
but as a metaphor for personal torment, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, I think that that's how it's supposed to be intended. Like, okay, he's not allowed in heaven, and also he's not allowed in hell. So he's stuck in this horrible liminal of earth.
Yeah, but you can't interact with anything here because you know, people can or can't see you, or
Well,
I
the
get
whole
bored.
jack-o'-lanterns were supposed to also ward off Jack of the Lantern.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. It was originally a turnip, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Will o' the Wisp is the same thing, but his light was just a shovel full of burning coal from hell. So
This is a tea with Uncle Badger. Like I was wondering if all the Jacks were sort of an everyday person, someone who you would meet anywhere in the street, any given ordinary
ooh,
person.
that's an interesting take.
It is, and it's like the Jack. When I was kind of looking into Jack of the Lantern, they were saying that his name was Stingy Jack in the sense that Jack would just be any old regular dude,
Hmm.
basically, like a Jack or a John, even.
Yeah,
Just being kind of like a regular run of the mill man, like.
yeah. The quintessential John Doe.
Um, Glowing Ember says, really not relevant connection, but the new Rings of Power show, they forge the rings from sword and certain metals. I have not seen this. Have you? So I don't know about Rings of Power.
Sure. Well, I haven't seen it either. The Force
I
Rings
know
from
it's all over my Amazon packages.
yeah, Force Rings from sword and certain metals. If they are casting steel swords, they're full of it. If they're casting non-ferrous rings, yeah, that's plausible. So I don't know how they're showing it. The let's see what was it called, the Game of Thrones, where they're pouring molten steel into casts. No, that
It was
doesn't
so
work.
cool though when they poured
Yeah,
they
it's really
poured
cool
what
to
was it,
watch.
gold, I think, over Daenerys's brother's head, right? Towards
Yeah,
the
that
beginning.
molten gold that would suck.
That was so cool though. Like that
Yeah.
scene from the show, I was like,
Well, he got what he deserved, didn't he?
yes.
Like, that guy
And
was a
then like the gold would like harden, right? And it would
it
be
would
like
it
kind of
would
a
cool,
cast of his.
yeah. I don't know offhand the melting point of gold, but it's certainly hot enough that he would die.
I mean,
It would,
he would be dead for sure. And then what? Would you
oh yeah,
have some sort of strange cast of his
you
head?
would. I don't know. I don't know how well the bone of the skull would hold up after that. Because I don't know how hot the gold melts at. I know it's hot enough that he'd be dead. Um, yeah, he wouldn't be there anymore. So, um, I wouldn't want to try it. No, no, I don't need a gold hat that bad. Mm-mm.
What about placing jewels? Like into like setting jewels into things. Like how does that work at the forge, or is that not done at the forge?
That is more jeweler and goldsmith kind of work. Goldsmith, silversmith, jewelers, and I don't have that kind of skill. I've never tried to set a jewel or a gem anywhere. One, I don't have any. But even like a common quartz stone, I have never tried to do that with anything. Although that'd be fun. That'd be something to try when I get a little bit better at it. but I need different materials, I
What
think.
about glitter?
Glitter?
Yeah. What about glitter?
I think the glitter will be burned to a crisp. Well, it depends on how you try to do it.
Like maybe you'd have to make it first and then dip it in resin and then dip it in glitter.
That you could do. Actually, you could. So, like, my brain is working on this now. You could chisel out a channel and then fill the channel with a resin that's been impregnated with glitter, and then yes, you could decorate it that way. And actually, that would be an extremely permanent way of doing it. That would be the best way to do it.
Didn't you recently this year have a booth somewhere where you were selling some of your stuff or something? I
Yes.
think I saw you.
Yes. So this past September, I was at the Lakewood Lions Club Renaissance Fair, which is actually the entire fair. It's one weekend a year annually.
Where is that at?
That is Lakewood, New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was the blacksmith there, and I was doing demonstrations and just presentations on smithing, and I loved every second of it, and I was exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah, festival work is a lot. What
Yeah.
were you like smithing stuff like
Oh yeah.
on site?
Live forging and forging demonstrations of
That's
different techniques
awesome.
and things. Yeah, I loved it. Um, and that's the first time I've been able to do something like that, and I'm hooked. I'm going back every year now for as long as I live in New Jersey, anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. That
Yep.
I,
Probably
I
the
love
most.
I love Ren fairs too.
Oh,
Sadly, our
hell
Ren
yeah.
fair here, like if I really want to go to a good Ren fair that's close, I basically have to go to like Ohio or Kentucky. Like our Ren fair is okay, but it's just very okay. Like it's not
Yeah.
I
It's
love like a super immersive Ren fair
mm,
experience.
yeah, that's not super immersive at the Lakewood Lions Club because it's only a once annual. Like it's rented space and it's for a single weekend. The Pennsylvania Ren Fair is extremely immersive, and that's just across the border. Over that's about 2 hour drive for me. It's in it's right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it's massive. And they but they have the stage jousting.
That's cool.
Yeah, my Ren Fair, the one that I do every once annually, we have the Knights of Valor who join us and they do their jousting, and that is full contact. So it sounds like a car crash when they hit. That's they're not pulling their punches, and it's a great time.
So
I didn't get this.
do you have like an Etsy or anything where you sell some of your stuff?
I don't yet. Well, I do technically. It's set up, but there's nothing in it. I'm hoping to get my Etsy store open back up around the first of the year, or at the latest around in bulk.
Okay.
But I tried to start that up when I was driving truck, and I can't maintain an Etsy store and drive an 18-wheeler. I just couldn't do it. So I had to shut it down. And I haven't gotten it started back up since because I haven't got enough stock. I'm working on solving that problem. So hopefully I'll be able to open up an Etsy at the latest by in bulk.
Because I feel like you could always just I mean, I understand being on the road and who knows how long or not being able to like make something in time or whatever, but it could always just be made to order stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I could, but there would have to be the understanding of this is what I do for a living. It's going to
Right.
take me a long, like turnover for the order is going to be egregiously long. Even now, like blacksmithing takes a long time.
Yeah.
Even more so when you're only able to work on it for 4 days at a time. So that was the issue with the axe that I was trying to make, and it didn't turn out well anyway. So it took me about a year to forge an axe that broke.
What did it break on?
The forge weld didn't take. So as soon as I swung it, it just split and delaminated.
Oh, dang.
Mm. Well, it's not a failure because I learned how to do it.
Yeah.
I know what I did wrong. So,
Well, do you have any advice for anyone who's looking to get into forge craft before we
uh,
wrap this up?
yeah. So if you want to get into that,
Like maybe books or other content creators here on YouTube
yeah,
or
actually an outstanding instructional YouTuber who does black. His name is it's Black Bear Forge on YouTube. Definitely check him out. Also, Roy from Christ Centered Ironworks is extremely highly skilled, and he does a lot of instructional videos. And Big Dog Forge, they all really know. Also, Path of Fire, check her out. She's an outstanding smith and one of the very few female blacksmiths out there, and one of the most skilled blacksmiths I've ever seen on YouTube. So, and I'd love to see more ladies get into smithcraft because she, like, I don't know why y'all don't, but um,
I
I think
did. I went to like a glass blowing thing once for a friend's birthday party. And I know that glass blowing is like not the same, but like that's probably the closest I've gotten. And that was good for me. Like
yeah,
I felt very flammable. So
well, I mean,
I
okay,
have a lot
but
of respect for the smithers and the creators that like definitely have a lot of respect because even just making a glass paperweight was, yeah.
yeah, you definitely get an idea of just how much heat is involved.
Is it a
But
lot of floor space for like the equipment?
um, it depends on what equipment you want to get into and what you're using. The anvil, I have a 110-pound anvil. That doesn't have a big footprint, so that doesn't take up a whole lot of room. You need to have room for a forge of some sort, either coal or gas forge. Gas forges are actually easier to work with for the beginner, and I would look into NC Tools for a gas forge. They make an outstanding one.
This sounds like a
And
very expensive hobby too.
yes, it is, and it's something that you need to have a startup. Startup cost is extremely expensive. You're looking at spending about $4,000 just to get started, and then you got to get metal. But
Hmm.
metal can be salvaged. Well, I was a professional truck driver, and I'm single with no kids. I had the ability to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but once you got the basic tools, it's go at your own pace. You're going to build more of your own tools than most other hobbies because that's what blacksmiths do. Um, and you don't need an anvil. You need an anvil-like object. A large chunk of metal, like a railroad track, will do you, and you can find things like that, or a swage block, or something hard enough, usually made of metal. If you can't get a hold of something like that, what you can do is you take the head of a sledgehammer, you put it in a vise, and use that. And then use any other ball peen hammer and get started that way. You can also build a legit a coal fire, and run reverse the hose on a shop vac and use that as your bellows. And you can do it on a very low budget, but you have to do a lot of research and understand how fire works. Otherwise, you might not have a garage anymore.
Yeah. And that's probably important not to burn
Yeah,
your garage,
yeah,
you
you want to
know?
keep that. You want to keep that around.
Yeah.
So you need to
Yeah.
understand fire safety. I would say if you're going to spend money anywhere, spend money on a proper fire extinguisher if that's the only thing that you can splurge on.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
and understand the laws in your area, and if you need a fire permit to do what you're doing. That way the fire company doesn't come down and run their hose down your forge. That would ruin your day and probably give you a fine. But
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on. I will make sure to put the link to your channel in the description. Like once this video
Okay.
is uploaded and everything, I'll put the link to your channel in the description. So that way, for those of you who are watching this live, or for those of you who might be watching the replay, you can go check out Blood, Sweat, and Steel. Go check them out. I think that you're doing something different here on YouTube. That's cool and that's not talked
Thank you.
about. So I appreciate you coming on my channel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me. I've actually really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all, like Haley Hayden, Rebecca Reynolds, Uncle Badger, everybody, you guys in the chat, Sydney and Little Red, Nightlight Dreams, Seti Redcap, Corey, Elle, everybody. I'm sure I might be missing a few of you, but thank you all so much. I'm going to end this stream. Okay.
All right.
Blessed be, guys.
Thanks.